My name is Brian Woodruff. I'm the director of the Campus Services Center here at Miami.
Yeah, and hi everyone. My name is Sarah Meany. I am the Associate Director for Residential Academic Initiatives in the Office of Residence Life.
All right, so today we are going to talk all about room selection for our rising second year students. So this is the time of the year when your students are probably beginning to think about that, what's going to happen next school year. And so we'll talk about the residency requirement and then a variety of other options, student created communities, sorority corridors, second year honors, scholar leader, the general process, which is what most students will take part in, information about being an RA, and then of course time for question and answer as well. So we'll jump right in. First off is that we do highly value the on-campus residential experience at Miami. So all first year and second year students are required to live on campus unless they meet one of the following criteria. That would be that they're at least 21 years of age or older before the first day of class. They've attended another university full-time for 2 years. That has to be after high school graduation. Or also if they would be commuting from home. So if any students were considering an exemption, we do have information about that on our website. There's a form to fill out that would need to be done. We have a small number of exemption requests each year. So we like to just make sure, get that out of the way at the beginning, that is an option if one of those might fit your student situation. We also do have a process for fraternity exemptions. This is rising second year men who are members of an approved fraternity who would apply to live in their off-campus fraternity house. This process is coordinated by the Cliff Alexander Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life and Leadership. Students apply through that process with them if they're joining a fraternity. If your student is in this situation, they should be getting information from the Cliff Alexander Office of all those details as that time approaches in the spring. Always important to remember to read those emails that you might be getting, that your students are getting. And then just one last note is to remind you that if your student were considering applying for an exemption to housing, make sure that they do not sign a housing contract because we are not able to approve exemptions after students have gone through and signed a housing contract. So if that is something that they're looking into, just make sure that they check out our website and would apply for that and make sure they would get an approval before considering anything else. All right, student created communities, Sarah?
Yeah, so the first of our, I would say some of our specialized second year experiences are student created communities. This is a cool opportunity for students who maybe they've like really become close with their neighbors or they're really loving their LLC and they just want to keep the good times going for their next year. They can basically create their own community. So they will gather around a specific theme. They also don't have to be neighbors already. They could just be a group of friends who have found each other, maybe in classes, maybe in a student organization. We really run the gamut in terms of themes that students organize themselves around. But it's basically just enhancing that experience for their second year. So instead of just kind of doing a general lottery selection for housing, they group together with other people that they know or other people who have similar interests, and then that's how they're assigned space. So past communities, we again ranging the gamut. So around sustainability, we had a farmers market group, we had a hiking club, we had Mom, What's for Dinner? They kind of coalesced around cooking and eating healthy. So it really is whatever the students want to do. We usually have between 8 and 30 students. So we want to not too small, but also not too big. So we're looking for about that number of students to come together and form a community. They do have the support of our residence life staff. They also have a faculty or staff advisor who will help them out. And they receive additional resources. So we have a budget that we give students for their program. They meet with our in-hall staff to kind of talk through the leading and programmatic efforts. So there's just this added layer of support for those students when they kind of again coalesce around a theme. So the timeline for our student created communities, the application is already open. It is all available on our community options webpage. You can go under student created communities. We're currently advertising that to our current first year students. Um, Applications aren't due until February 9th, so we've got a long time. So we're all over break. And then we will look at those applications. They'll include a video kind of talking about what their community theme is and the ideas that they have for programming. And then we send out notifications to students on February 19th. And then they have a few weeks to finalize those rosters, right? So we need to know the names of the people who are going to be in the community. And then we have a leadership training session sometime in April. So the student creative process is really cool. And again, everything's laid out on the website if you want to forward that on to your students.
And Sarah mentioned on websites. I do just want to make a note to everyone that at the end of the session here, we do have a screen that just summarizes some key websites. So we don't necessarily have those listed throughout, but at the end, we'll have all of them put together, some helpful links that you want to make sure to keep track of. So no worries about remembering the specific websites here along the way. Um, so after student created, the next process we want to talk about is the sorority corridor housing. So rising second year students who will be sorority members will live in residence halls within their chapter. And so the process happens mid-spring, and it's coordinated together with the Cliff Alexander Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life and Leadership. And so sorority corridors are designated within the 5 halls that you see here on the screen. That's Hamilton, Minnick, Scott, Richard, and McCracken. Each chapter is located within the halls. Those locations are determined by the sorority leadership as they map out where each chapter's corridor will be. The process does begin in late March. Students who are participating in this will receive the important information and directions through the Cliff Alexander office in the coming months. So you'll begin to hear more about that. Another specialized process that we have is our second year honors community. So this is for current first year students who live in the honors residential college and would like to return for the second year. So it's a great opportunity to be able to return to that community if they're really enjoying the time there. So it's an online process that'll be in early April for students who are interested in this in the 3 buildings. There are a limited number of spaces that we can offer for this. And that's because we have to make sure that we hold enough room for our incoming first year students who will be joining us next year. So there are a number of spaces for students who are interested, and that's definitely something to keep an eye on. More information about that will be coming from the honors program, but that will be in early April that they'll have the opportunity to return. Scholar Leader housing. So students who will be part of the Scholar Leader program will have the opportunity to select their rooms in Stoddard and Elliott halls. This process occurs in early April as well, and more information about this will be available for those students who are interested in the program, have applied to be part of the Scholar Leader program, and we do have information online, but that is only for students who are applying and are part of the Scholar Leader program.
Let me just jump in on Scholar Leader.
Yeah.
So the process is open now, and it is a really neat community to be a part of. So it's not like, oh, you have to be this, a super high achieving honor student. Like, all are welcome to apply. It is about engaging in leadership. There's a special class that goes along with it to really help, I would say, prepare our future leaders. So it's a really neat opportunity if you want to encourage your students to check it out. But the process is open right now. They are recruiting students. There's an interview process, and then they're selected. But it's a pretty neat opportunity for second year students.
Yeah, and a great opportunity just from the housing perspective as well. If you all are familiar with Stoddard and Elliott halls, they're located right in the center of campus, right kind of near Harrison Hall and the Upham Arch, Upham Hall, all of that right there by the seal. So just a neat program and place to live as well. So for each of these processes that I've mentioned so far, the the sorority, the honors, the scholar leader, and the student created, um, the same general selection process takes place of how students pick rooms in those communities. So the first step is that the group would begin their housing application and create a roommate group if desired with another roommate. And for each of the processes as well, whoever's taking part in those, they get messages about how this happens, and the dates are a little different. But these steps occur for each of them. So the second step then is that they would be sent a lottery time slot from our office by email. This tells them the day and time that they'll be able to select their room and complete that housing application. And then beginning on their assigned lottery time, which they received in the email, that's when they get to actually log in, go in and select a specific room, pick their meal plan, and then complete their housing contract. So the majority of the rising second year students do participate in the general process. So the specialized processes we went through, hundreds of students do go through those. They're very popular. But the largest portion of students are going through the general online process. And so this takes place in April. Anyone who participated in one of those previous processes, such as sorority, student created, etc., they would not need to go through this process because they've already picked their rooms. But the general process is just like the others. It takes place online using the online housing portal. And here we do have some dates here. You'll see the process steps are very similar to what you've already seen. For the other processes, we try to keep things as simple as we can. But this is the overall timeline for that process. So if your student is interested in selecting a room with a specific roommate, it's important that they do organize a roommate group before room selection. They'll receive information from Campus Services Center by email explaining the important dates and times. Then on Friday, April 12th, they'll have that opportunity to enter the system and begin setting up roommate groups if they wish. So this is completely optional, but it is important to do this ahead of time if they have a specific roommate request they want to be with. Doing this ahead of time, getting this group set up, allows them to easily pick a room together on their selection day without spending additional time trying to confirm the group. So if they've already got that group set up, then whoever goes in first can just pick the room and assign both roommates to the space. Makes it a lot easier. So students will receive their lottery room selection time slot on April 19th. That will tell them their exact day and time when they can begin the room selection and housing contract process. So roommate groups that are set up in advance do receive the same lottery time slot to make things easy so they can be sure to get in at the same time. And room selection is planned for the week of April 22nd. Students will be assigned lottery time slots throughout the week. We do this, we spread it out just to make sure that it doesn't slow the system down too much, that there's not issues. And if there are any questions or concerns, that our office staff in Campus Services Center is able to address those and answer those quickly. So on the room selection day, your student will log in and be able to select their room, their meal plan, and complete the housing contract. And again, if they've got a roommate group set up, they'll be able to assign their roommate along with themselves into the room. I do want to make a note that depending upon the lottery time frame that your student receives, a small number of students may not see any available rooms when they enter the process. If this happens, your student will be able to continue with the housing contract application. They'll select what's called assignment pending on the room selection page. We do expect full occupancy this fall. And so that means that during room selection, we always expect to have periods of time when there's no open rooms to choose from, especially later in the week. But during the summer and spring months, we learn of a large number of students who will not be returning to housing. Students who are maybe going to withdraw and haven't notified us yet, and they still pick a room. Students who may choose to study abroad, do various programs. A lot of reasons why someone might pick a room, but then they don't actually end up being here. So if your student is placed in this assignment pending status, they'll be able to enter their roommate requests, housing preferences, all of those along the way. They're guaranteed housing. And then as spaces become available, we use the preferences that they enter to process their housing assignments. Every year, we're able to get everyone assigned, typically by midsummer, the latest. So I've been in this role in this office for about 15 years. We've had this. This is kind of how things go every year, and there are those number of students who may be in that assignment pending status, but we work very carefully to make sure and plan for how many beds we have, how many students we'll have. So fear not, if your student were to be in that situation, they're absolutely guaranteed a space, and we work really, really hard to get them as close to their preferences as we can. So fear not with that.
Well, and Brian,
Yeah,
your office sends out a video, kind of a step
we
by step.
do. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, we do have. Last year we developed a video about kind of what the room selection process looks like, the actual steps that students go through, what the website looks like. And so we will have that available on our website for students to see that as well. So it's real helpful. Just, hey, I want to see what it looks like ahead of time. What am I going to click? What's it going to look like when I get in there? So we do have that video that we'll have available as well. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, I do highly recommend them watching it ahead
Yeah.
of time. They're navigating systems that they've seen maybe once
Mhm.
before. So just to get kind of the feel of even just like the colors and where the buttons are, it's like, oh, lottery, it feels high
Right,
pressure. It's not high
right.
pressure, but they can just feel a little bit more familiar with the system
Yeah.
before they go in.
Absolutely. And in fact, to that point, last year was the first year we had that video available, and we did see a reduction in the number of just questions about how the process worked. So it seems like it really was helpful, and students seem to be a little bit more informed because we can write things down all day long, but sometimes watching it really helps. And so I will definitely encourage that.
Yeah. All right. And then kind of the one of the last things that they can do as a sophomore, as a rising student, is maybe become a resident assistant or an RA. So the Office of Residence Life hires student staff members to live on the floor with your students. So if you remember, there probably was someone greeting you when you came in the hall when you moved in, and someone up on the floor. And so we recruit our RAs from, I mean, really all of our students, but we have a lot of people who are in their first year, they're rising sophomores, and they apply to be RAs for their sophomore year. So just want to tell you a little about that opportunity. It is a great way. It's a wonderful leadership opportunity on campus. They help us with our residential pillars of success. So that's around safe and healthy homes, persistent retention, diversity and inclusive environments, extension of the learning environment, which is my favorite. That's what I do all the time. And then kind of easing that transition to adulthood. So those are kind of the main kind of programmatic things that our RAs help us do, beyond things like duty and just keeping an eye on students, making sure everybody's okay. But our RAs are really critical to our kind of how we deliver our residential experience on our campus. So, and it does come with a significant stipend. So if you want to check all that information out, it is on the website. But just some key dates. The application is open. That opened on November 1st. So you can see those applications for next academic year. Applications priority application is due on January 7th. So completing both references, so just doing the whole piece, January 7th, lock in on that date. On the 19th of January, we'll send out our interview, kind of our interview slots, get everybody signed up. We'll interview people the week of February 12th. And then on March 18th is when we will tell people if they've been offered a job. And when we send them their offer letter, we tell them which hall they have also been assigned to. And then they have a week to make that decision. A lot of this overlaps with other processes. So you might have somebody trying to be an RA and also trying to be a scholar leader, and maybe they also are thinking about honors housing. We've really tried to align our processes so students have all of the information available and then make decisions about housing. So it's not like, oh, I'm not going to take that because I don't know if I'm going to be an RA yet. We've really tried to align all of the dates so they have their full spread of options before they move forward.
All right. So we've come to the end of our kind of our scheduled details we wanted to go through. Here, this is a page here with some links. We've talked about the general room selection process. we've talked about the RAs, student communities, sorority, honors, scholarly leader. These are different websites that help cover more details about each of those. So you definitely want to, we'll leave this on here for a little while, but definitely want to keep those links, encourage your student to read it, any and all of those that might apply. And so with that, it looks like we've got some questions that have come through, which is great. So we'll start jumping right into those. It looks like the first question here is about honor students, and do honor students have to return to the honors community? If not, where can they go? No, they do not have to. We typically have about 150 to 200 spaces available for the second year honors. So it's by no means all of the honors students. And it is first come, first serve on those. So typically we have enough spaces for those who are interested in staying. We always see that, but if not, then they typically, what the majority of the honors students do is go through the general room selection process, or they may go through the scholarly leader program, or maybe they join a sorority, or maybe they're an RA, or maybe they do student created, really, so they can really choose to return to the honors community if that's their intention, or can go through one of the other specialized processes. We see any and all of those combinations.
Yeah, and we've actually heard some really positive feedback about our second year returning honor
Yeah.
students in the community. So all of the first, well, all of the first year honor students are living in the honors buildings, and then having some returning students kind of sprinkled throughout has just built this really neat community.
Mhm.
So it's an interesting opportunity, and you can kind of stay again very connected with the honors
Yep.
college.
Okay, so a question here to confirm that after going through the sorority rush, that your student would, if you joins a sorority, um, I'm not quite sure I understand that question. We'll move on to another one though, and I might go back to that one and read that again. Students who have a question about if you have an accommodation, so a housing accommodation through the Miller Center for a particular a single or whatever it may be through the Miller Center, we will reach out to your student ahead of time, typically in January. That's an important reminder. So I thank you for bringing that question up. The Campus Services Center will reach out and send a link to a form for your student to fill out. Anyone who currently has an accommodation on file, let it so they can tell us if they'd like to continue that accommodation and any preferences on building location. So that they will not need to go through the Miller Center again. If they've already got it on file, we know that, and we'll be reaching out to them by email in January. Question about is there a place to go with more detail about pictures, dimensions of rooms? We do have the parent and family website has links. I believe it's on the parent and family website, links to Pinterest, where there are many photos that students and parents have uploaded of rooms. It's pretty organized there. We would have that opportunity. That's typically where we refer folks to go to see pictures. There are also, in addition to that, our website, our housing website, also has general information about every residence hall on campus. So kind of what kind of building it is, what are the rates there, what are the amenities, what are the types of furniture, dimensions, some general information about every hall is available on our website as well, in addition to the Pinterest option. Okay, so a question about what options are available for second year students. This does change, and we don't always have a complete guarantee of what will be available, because it depends upon what our anticipated first year numbers are, where the communities might be, where we move some things around. But generally, we will typically expect Maple Street, Etheridge, Withrow Hall, Heritage Commons, Ogden Hall will be back online for renovation. So that'll be available. Bishop Hall is available typically. And then we also have a variety of locations that may have a combination of both first year and second year students and upper class mixed together. So we do have those sprinkled throughout campus as well. Denison is one of those that I can think about that's mixed first year and upper class. But we typically don't put out a full list of what those are ahead of time, just again, because they do tend to change a little bit. And often we're expanding what they are as well. So anything that's available for your student, they would be able to see it when they do log into the process. But again, some of those that I mentioned are some of the ones that are always basically upper class, it seems like. Okay, let's see here. How is information communicated to students is a question. So the number one way that information is shared is through email. That's the best way because we have a lot of details. So that's going to be the number one way. So please, please, please make sure that your students are checking their Miami email accounts. That's where most offices are going to be sending information. That's where the Campus Services Center, specifically related to room selection processes, will send information. We do, for some of our larger communications, we'll try to post those on our website as well so that anyone can see them. But sometimes with the various processes, it's a direct email to students. There'll also be, our website is always up to date to go there and to see the details. But again, that Miami email account is going to be the primary place. You want to make sure your students are checking that. All right. So in the general room selection process, can students create a group of students for multiple rooms or just themselves and a roommate? So you would not be able to do it for a group of rooms. It would just be for, we allow roommate groups up to 4 maximum, and that is because of Heritage Commons, which is the 4-bedroom apartments, as well as we do have a handful of quad rooms where 4 students live in the same room in the residence halls. So we do allow up to 4, but they do all need to pick within the same room. So if, for example, if they had a group of 4 and they were not trying to pick a quad or there's no quad available, then they may need to split the group up. They wouldn't necessarily be able to pick 2 double rooms. However, if being together in that kind of a group is something they're interested in, then that's where the student created process may be a good idea for a group of students who want to be together.
All
All
right.
right,
So
Sarah.
yeah, so the question is around how competitive is the RA application process? So just to give you some scope, we have about 250 RAs hired on our campus right now. That will be a little bit less next year with some buildings going under renovation. So just for some perspective, the last year we had around 300 applications for the RA position, but we had almost 170 returning RAs. So we had a really big group of current RAs who wanted to return to the position for another year. And that's really where we see kind of the ebb and flow. 300 applications for right, it's not 250 spots, it's really whatever's left after all of our returners are hired. So I would say it is quite competitive. It's kind of highly sought after leadership position on campus. Again, the stipend that our RAs receive is quite competitive. So it's a pretty attractive opportunity for students. So if they're thinking about it, they should definitely be talking with their RA right now, talking with their head of hall. You know, helping out, attending programs, being a good community member in general, that all of that stuff helps when they come around to apply to be an RA. And then if they are interested in being an RA and unsure about being in a fraternity, could they go through the RA process and withdraw or choose to live with their fraternity? I always like for people to keep their options open. So, your student can go through the RA process, get to know more about what the position is. They can also go through we have RAs who are fraternity men, but they are RAs on campus, so those things aren't mutually exclusive. They just can't live in the house and also be an RA because we can't split them. They don't get to have 2 places to live. So thinking about that, the advice I would give is go through the RA process. And then once it comes time to, like, if you have an RA offer in hand, then making that decision about what you need to do. Right now, there isn't a decision to make because you haven't applied for the position. So I would say go forward with that. Another question around, do sorority dorms have a need for RAs, and what are the names? So yes, we have RAs in all of our sorority buildings. So again, that is Scott, Minnick, McCracken, Richard, and Hamilton. So our central quad residence halls is where our sorority corridors are. We do try to not have an RA of the same chapter assigned to that floor. So we try to then we try to spread them out. So we have a lot of sorority women who serve as RAs, but we kind of decouple them from their chapter on the floor, just so there's not an additional kind of leadership dynamic that can be there just might be some conflict of interest. So we remove that for our RAs who are in the sorority halls. Um, and then this next one, Brian, you might need to help me with this, but we just have a very robust on-campus experience for our sorority women right here in the residence halls. When everything was remodeled, maybe 8 years ago, the sorority buildings are absolutely gorgeous, and they were redesigned with the specific purpose to house our sorority women. They have chapter rooms that are beautifully decorated. All the students have access to them. It's a really cool synergy how everything works together. So where the fraternities have off-campus houses that we don't involve ourselves in, other than the exemption, the sorority LLC, kind of the sorority corridor housing is a really neat integrated approach to sorority women. So I don't know if there's more history you want to talk about why they're
Yeah,
on.
no, I think that's great. We've got this sort of most chapters have suites, meeting room suites that they have in the buildings as well for meeting, and it's a great environment. So we've got a question here about room configuration options. Are there suites, singles? So really generally it's similar to what your students would be seeing now as first year students. The majority of our spaces on campus are double rooms. We do have some triples, not a whole lot, but some. We do have some available. We know that there is a demand for that, and so we do try to keep some of those in the room selection process. We just don't have a lot of them in general, but we do have some. We have even fewer quads, and a quad being just a regular residence hall room with 4 beds. Those are pretty big rooms. Typically, we have a handful of those, and we'll keep them in the process if we can, but again, even fewer of those. And then we do have the Heritage Commons apartments, which that is only for upper class students, second year and older. So your students would be eligible for that. Heritage Commons is our 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, fully furnished with a full kitchen, living room. They're really nice. They are pretty popular, as you can imagine. We've got 430 beds in the apartments, and they do tend to go pretty quickly. But that is absolutely an option for your student as well. Single rooms, we do have some single rooms, and we do sometimes can get them in the room selection process. Often, though, we aren't able to put them in the process, and we instead do a wait list for singles. And that's really driven from the fact that we have to hold a lot of singles for disability and medical accommodations, and we don't always know how many of those we're going to have. And so to make sure that we have them available, we hold them out of the process. And then as the summer goes on, if we're learning that we don't need as many for the accommodations, then we can start to release them to students on the waiting list. So it's kind of how the singles will go. Let's see here, question then kind of on the single topic as well. If you're in one now, do you get a priority for next year? No, we don't do that. We aren't able to do that. Again, unless your student is in one of the accommodations through the Miller Center, in which case, absolutely, yes, we will continue to honor those. And there are some singles in the sorority corridors as well. And so sometimes we're able to include those in those processes as well.
All right. So the question is, what if your student likes her current LLC arrangement, for example, the Entrepreneurship LLC, and would like to stay within that residence hall or themed community. So first of all, I'm so glad that she's having a great experience. That makes me really happy. So unfortunately, entrepreneurship is just for first year students. The building is pretty small, and it's very popular. People really like entrepreneurship, which makes me happy. But this would be a perfect example of creating a student created LLC, right? So if she's still really liking the theme, and if she likes people in her community, this would be the perfect moment to kind of bring people together and say, y'all kind of want to keep the good times rolling? Like, should we do this next year? A student created LLC, I think, would be the perfect opportunity for someone who you're living in a hall. It's only for first year students, and then so we have to turn the whole building over. We do have some mixed halls. Brian was talking about that earlier. Um, but we have fewer and fewer like opportunities to kind of convert and just be a returner to your LLC. But I know entrepreneurship is not one of those. Um, so another question around sorority. So if you join a sorority, you have to live in the sorority corridor if you'd want to be in a student created community. And then also kind of a connected one, is it required to live in like on the floor with your sorority? Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. I do not believe you need to do that. That is an opt-in option.
I think the expectation from the Cliff Alexander office is that the women do live in the corridor,
Okay.
but can contact the Cliff Alexander office to basically request to be exempt from that.
Okay. So then with the kind of, if you have a sorority kind of in conflict with a student created community, let's bring in the Cliff office to just double check before moving forward. So I'm not on the kind of in the minutia of what's happening in fraternity and sorority life. So we'd want to bring that into the conversation. But we're
Yeah, I don't,
again,
especially in that case where if you were in a student created already established, I don't that shouldn't be an issue.
okay. So something, and then yeah, so something to have your student contact the office once that the sorority process has wrapped. Okay, and then okay, we hit that one. All right. How many students need to apply for a student created community? Is there a minimum? Yes. So 8 to 30 is what we're kind of looking for in the number of students in a community. So kind of beyond that, if you have 6 students or 5 students who are interested in living together, they really could just kind of coordinate and try to get, with their lottery and who they're rooming with, and then see if they can pick rooms together or at least in the same hall. But we are looking for kind of that minimum number being at least 8. So critical mass of students to come together. So that's what we're looking for.
All right, a question about if the residence halls are co-ed. And yes, with the exception of the sorority buildings, which are all female, the rest of our buildings are co-ed um, by room. Um, generally, we have kind of blocks of corridors, kind of block off genders within the corridors. But our upper class housing is a little bit more, can be more co-ed by room. Generally, we really try to make sure that it's planned around accessibility of bathrooms. And with especially our renovated buildings, we have smaller restrooms that are, and more of them. And so that allows us to have more flexibility um, with the rooms, but each room is still single gender. And if that situation does not work for your student, we do have a gender inclusive housing process that Residence Life handles. So the Residence Life website there on the screen you could go to, and there is a process to request gender inclusive housing if being assigned with the sex-based rooms of male and female doesn't work for your student. So we do recognize that, and there's a process for that as well. Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, so a question around alcohol. So is alcohol banned from all the sorority housing? Yes, like you need to be 21 to drink. So usually our sophomores aren't that old yet. So it's not necessarily banned, but you need to be 21 to drink alcohol, which most of our on-campus residents are not. And yes, for the majority of I mean, we don't assign men to any of the buildings, but Brian just touched on the gender inclusive policy around our housing. So if that is something that seems to be salient for your student, definitely engage with us in that process.
We got another question here about just sororities and what percent of women live in sorority housing. It's typically about 800, 8 or 900 women go through the second year sorority housing process. So for the most part, with some exceptions of students who might be RAs or might do other processes, generally most of um, the new members, the new sorority members, will live in a corridor with their chapter, and it's typically between 8 and 900, I think, is the number we see. Um, all right, a question here. My son has 2 people he wants to live with, and so they would like a room for 3. And so I think we talked a little bit about triples, that absolutely they can set up a roommate group of 3. That's a good idea to do, to make sure that if there is a triple available, that they can pick that. And then hopefully they would be able to, but if they couldn't, then probably the third person that didn't get assigned into the triple would pick a room nearby. And then, that's the type of thing that all 3 of them could also email our office, email the Campus Services Center. We do work through the summer for special requests as well. So, if we know, hey, these 3 students really wanted to be in a triple together, our staff will keep that on a list. And if we do have a triple that becomes available, maybe one was previously unavailable, it is now, then we work and manage those, that request list as well. So we do have a handful of those that we help with each year. Then also going down that roommate path here, there's a question about students who don't necessarily have a roommate ahead of time, and that is perfectly normal, and it is very common. By no means does the majority of students have a roommate group set up ahead of time. It's usually about half is what we generally see. But a lot of second year students just go in and they know where they want to live, they pick a space, and then maybe somebody's already there and they pick the second space, or maybe your student picks the space and someone else comes in during their time slot and they pick the second space, and they immediately can see whoever's second into the room would see who the other person already is in the room. So they'd already know who that is. They could pick the space and then right away be able to communicate back and forth. Because with the upper class processes, the second year process here that we're talking about, you are picking your room. Again, with the exception of the cases where we might have that assignment pending status, where we're working on the assignment for you. Aside from those, the majority of students are going to pick their room themselves and know right away where they're living and who their roommate is. And then, so to the point about the lottery question about, is the lottery random or is it based on anything else like last names or GPA? It is random. The only piece that is not random is that anyone who does have a roommate group set up ahead of time, the roommate groups are given the same lottery time slot. They're matched up so that they can go in at the same time. But aside from that, we go in, we tell the system, hey, give all these people lottery time slots. And it is, our housing system does it purely randomly. And we use the same system that over 600 other schools around the world use. Other Ohio schools, it's a pretty standard system. And so it is a random process. So we don't look at anything like GPA or names or anything like that. All right. If a student, if a student will be studying abroad next semester, and that I would also add to that study abroad, student teaching, interning, really doing any kind of program that would take them away from the Oxford campus. What do they do? And so if they're planning to be in that kind of program, study abroad, or do something that takes them away from Oxford for the spring semester, then of course they'll want to go through room selection, pick their room. They'll be here in the fall. And then we've got a form that's called the Not Returning to Housing form that they would fill out. So students who are here now are filling that form out now who are studying abroad in the spring. So it's typically in the fall they would do that. But if your student is planning to be away from campus in the fall semester, then they can, if they know for sure that they're going to be away, then there's really not a need to go through and pick a room, because unfortunately we can't hold that space for them for the fall, because we usually have a larger number of students who are here in the fall. a variety of requests and a lot of demands that we're working to meet. So we're just not able to hold rooms offline for the fall. We would work to get them assigned as close as we can to their preferred location for the spring, but our staff does work to assign students who are returning from study abroad and those other programs. We assign those students typically in January before they would arrive for the spring semester. So, but if there's any doubt that they may not do the program, I would encourage, go ahead and pick the room. That's fine. You can pick a room, and then if your student does decide, yeah, I am going to study abroad, I am going to do that. Well, then we have what's called the not returning to housing for fall form, and they fill that out. In fact, we encourage them to fill that out whether or not they pick a room or not, just so that we know what they're doing, what their plans are. We can update them in the system. Because if a student doesn't fill out that form and also doesn't pick a room, then we're going to be bugging them with regular emails saying, hey, you didn't do anything. What are you doing? So we do need one of those two things. But it doesn't hurt for them to pick a room. They'll fill out that not returning form. We'll take them out of housing for the fall while they're away. And then again, we'll work to reassign them as close as we can to their original location for the spring when they return. And again, that's the not returning to housing form is what that's called, because again, that's one of the benefits of on campus and our housing contract is that if your student is not here for an approved, one of those approved reasons, we will release them from the contract for that period when they're away. Of course, if plans changed and they were no longer going to be away, then they'd still be required to live on campus. But we do allow that for those programs when they're away. Okay. Question about fraternity houses and their availability. Yes, whether or not they know that before the room selection processes. Absolutely. I think that those applications are typically due in March, possibly even earlier than that. That's going to be a question for the Cliff Alexander office, which actually on the page here that you see where it says sorority questions, that miamioh.edu/FSLL, that's fraternity and sorority life and leadership is what that stands for. That is also where you could find out details about the fraternity exemption and contact that office. I know they've got a timeline. I don't have it handy, but they do have a timeline for that. And that is all finished up before the room selection processes happen, before the general process at the end of March. As far as where the sorority LLC is asking about where the sorority LLCs, those communities are, where they're placed, that is all done by the sorority leadership. We basically give them the floor plans and the list of all the rooms in the 5 buildings, and then they work based on the number of women in each chapter and how it lines up. They map all of that out with where they're each located. And then we then kind of more on that process, then our office updates each of those rooms in the housing system to be labeled for, these are the Delta Gamma rooms, these are the Phi Mu rooms, and so on. And then each of the women who are in those chapters are also updated in the system as which chapter they're in. And then when the process happens, the members of each chapter can only see the rooms that have been labeled for their chapter. So that's how that goes. And again, with the exception of the small number of students who may receive that assignment pending status, everyone else would pick their rooms and know right away where they're living. For the others, it would be an email from us letting them know when they've been placed. It's typically a pretty small number of students who are in that situation.
Yeah, there was a question about what happens for move-in for sophomore students. Do we have helpers like we did for first-year student move-in? Unfortunately, no. We don't have helpers. I think the nice part about upper class move-in is that it's not quite as high stress or high pressure as our first-year move-in. You can kind of show up. There's a window, but it's not. We need all the first year students to get in so we can give them off to the programming that they need to go to in the evening, afternoon, and evening. But it's just a much less stressful process, I think, for second year move in. It's not quite as many people on campus. And as long as you have your official move-in date, you can move in on Saturday or Sunday. So you're not kind of all narrowly defined to one window that you have to move into.
All right, here's a good question. Can students live on campus for all 4 years? And we do have students who do that. Absolutely. It's really important to us that we do maintain space for juniors and seniors. In fact, our junior senior room selection process, we do let them come in first. Of course, we're saving the right number of beds for our second year students who are required, as well as our incoming first year students. So we plan really carefully on what beds we're holding. But we do have space for several hundred rising juniors and seniors. And so we've already got, many have already picked rooms. We still have plenty of space available. So I would generally say that if your student is interested in that, for the most part, yes. You know, a large portion of our third year students do choose to go off campus, but we do work to maintain space on campus in really great locations as well. So, you know, Heritage Commons, some of the newer renovated spaces are available for juniors and seniors as well. And so if that's something that your student would be interested in, I think my advice would be keep an eye out, again, in email and on our website. Typically, we open up that process about the first week of October each year for the following school year. And that's, you know, they're not required to do it early. We just want to put it out there early. We know a lot of students are already thinking about their housing for the next year, whether it's on campus or off campus, by the time they're preparing for their third year. And so we do open it up typically about the first week of October. So if your students are interested in that, I would encourage them to keep an eye on that. And that's actually a pretty straightforward process. Basically, anyone who's enrolled and is a rising junior or senior just has access to the system, and we open it up on the date that we announce in October, and then they can just log in and pick a space. So there's no lottery or anything for rising juniors and seniors. Okay. I think those are the questions we've got. It was a lot. It was good. Appreciate that. If there's no others, it looks like there's no others, and we're going to finish about 5 minutes early, and that's okay. Appreciate everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to Sarah for your help, and Joe, thanks for helping to put this together.